This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Ayin Vav, and we're holding on Ayin Hey Amid Beis. We are 2 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says, Omar Mar, as we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the opinion of Sumchis that we dealt with in the previous daf. Says the Gemara, Omar Mar Hein Mishalmin Tashlumei Kefel. The Zaymimim are obligated to pay Kefel. Mitkamoida de Ganav Karen Bayilishlume. Says the Gemara, I don't understand why we know the rule of Eid Zaymim again. Is whatever they try to obligate, they are the ones that have to pay. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Why are the Zaymim have to pay both the Karen and the Kefel? Once the Ganav admitted that he stole, he has to pay the Karen. So therefore, the Ganav should pay the Karen. And the Eid Zaymim should also have to pay the additional Karen, the Kefel. Why, according to Sumchis, do they say, do they have to pay both? Answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Elazar Mishmei Derav, Tani, you have to change the Brisa as we turn over to Ayin Vav Amar Aleph. Says the Gemara, Tani, that what? Tashlum di Kefel. That ain't a chanami. You have to pay the payment which completes Tashlum. As the Tabrashi says, it's Mishalmin es ha-Kefel, v'hu Mishalem Shleisha Levad ha-Keren. And therefore, says the Gemara, of course, the real answer that we're dealing with right now is the fact that you have to complete the Kefel. Rashi is throwing in a line, and Rashi is telling us not only that, but you would also have to pay the other Gimel of the Dalid Vehe payment due to the Tvicha, or should the Dalid due to the Tvicha. And on the top line of Ayin Vav Amid Aleph says the Gemara, Ganav, moving on to the next case of the Mishnah, Vehikdesh Vachak Tavach Umachar. Says the Mishnah taught us he has to pay Kefel, but he does not have to pay Dalid Vehe. Says the Gemara, what is the reason he does not have to pay Dalid Vehe? Amri. Bishlam, I understand that why the chika tavach, the hektish katavach, because the animal belonged to hektish, that which he slaughtered. Veloy demarei katavach, and it was not his own. Therefore, there's no payments of dalid to the tzvicha. Ela hektish lechayiv. But ask the Gemara, but he should be chayiv to paying 5 times for the fact that he was makdishit. Mali macher lehedye, mali macher l'shamayim. What does it mean giving it to Akdish? It's the same thing, ostensibly, as selling the animal. And if you sell the animal, you have to pay 5, says the Gemara. By giving it to Akdish, you have to pay the same 5. Answers the Gemara, Hamani, Rav Shimni, Damar, Kochim, Shachayim, Bachriyusam, Bashursa, Demare, Kaime. The fact that you're obligated in the item, the achrayis of the item, therefore it's considered like it's in your rishos. Meaning, according to those who argue on Rav Shimon Chanami, you'd have to pay, because just like selling it is giving it to Akdish. But says the Gemara, Rav Shimon holds a chiddush, that since you're obligated on it, it's as if it's in your rishos. Ask the Gemara 1 second, Amidis Seifa, Rav Shimon, Avirishalav Rav Shimon. Answers the Gemara, you're right. Ella, you know we have to say, Achamay Eskinon, Bekachim Kalim, and a famously Valiba de Rav Yosi Aglili, opinion that we had many times prior, that Rav Yosi Aglili holds Amri Kache Kalim is Mamain Bailimhu, and therefore Bashusei Kaime. Meaning, the same type of answer as saying it's Rav Shimon. The problem with saying it's Rav Shimon is that the Seifa clearly said Rav Shimon. I'm pointing out that the Reish is not Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, it's Kache Kalim, Aliba de Rav Yosi. Ask the Gemara, but if this is true, Aval Kache Kachim Mai, what would the din be if it was Kache Kachim? Then it would not be Bershusa Demari. Then it would be considered in the Rishos of Hektish. Then L'chayra, what would the din be? Mishanta Shlumei Dalid Vehei. Ask the Gemara the classical question. We're 10 lines down. The first one on the line of Ayin Vav Amid Aleph. Aditani Reisha Ganav Itavach. The Reisha taught a case that you stole it, then you stored it, then you were mocked. Did you pay 4 or 5? Says the Gemara, why don't we differentiate within the case itself? Why are we bringing down another case that what? Aval bekachei kachim mishalta shlumei talad vehei. So ask the Gemara if we're going that's kachei kalim according to Rav Yosi, and therefore the diak is kachei kachim would not apply. The Mishnah should have differentiated within this din itself. Says the Gemara, you're right. Elaloi in reality, loshla kachei kachim, loshla kachei kalim. There's no difference in kachei kachim, kachei kalim. So we go back to our original question that being makdish the animal should be the same thing as being selling it, and therefore you should have to pay 5 times. Answers the Gemara, no. When you sell it to another person, the axe goes from Rishos A to Rishos B. Whereas Machar l'Shamayim Meikara Tura Deruvain Vahashta Tura Deruvain, it's still his animal, and therefore there is no payments of 5 times, even though fundamentally Misvara, it seemed logical. Mali Machar l'Hedya, Mali Machar l'Shamayim. Explains the Gemara that is not so. Rav Shimon Omer v'chulu continues the Gemara quoting the final din in the Mishnah, which is that Rav Shimon says that by hektish that you're chayav achriyusan, you have to pay 4 or 5. With animals that you're not chayav achriyusan, you are potter. Says the Gemara, about 20 lines from the bottom of the 2 dots, Amri. So now we can appreciate why Rav Shimon holds you got to pay 4 or 5 times. Because what's the difference if it's sold lehedyet? What's the difference if it's sold l'shamayim? And therefore, if Shimon holds, in the case of hektish, what's the din? The din is that you have to pay. The din is that you have to pay 4 or 5 times. However, ask the Gemara, if Chami Bayalei should have said the opposite. Coach Chayav Bachri Yusa, Mamish, the previous Gemara. If you're obligated in the chrayis of the kachim, what does that mean? That means it's still b'shusei demare, potter. Excuse me, potter. Why? Kachim. Why are you potter? You're potter because it never left. No, I read that wrong. Let's go back and Usai didn't make sense. Says the Gemara, Nachamo. Kachim shechayv achrusan should be potter. Why? It never left his own rishus. But if you're not obligated in their achrayis, chayiv demafik mirshusei, meaning it's the exact flip of what we said before. If the reason you're obligated in 4 or 5 is why, it's because being makdish it is the same thing as selling it. So it's only if it goes into that kachim's rishus. Says the Gemara, so that's only if you're chayiv achrayis, then it's true. It left. Then you did not leave your rishos, so you should be potter. If you're not chayiv b'achrayis, then it did leave your rishos, and then it should be like selling and you should be chayiv. So the exact opposite of what we said. Says the Gemara, Amri, Rav Shimon on Musa Dachrita Koi. Vachi Gatani, Rav Shimon is talking about something else. The Tanakama learns, or we learned prior, that if someone steals from the Ganif, there's no payment of 4 or 5. If you steal hektish from the house of the owner, potter. My time, because says in the Torah, mi beis oish, ve'loi mi beis hektish. That's the Tanakama sheet of a Mishnah that we saw earlier. Rabbi Shimon Omer, and this is the din that are Rav Shimon. So you'd read the Mishnayos and you think Rav Shimon is talking about the Tanakama. Nay, Rav Shimon is going back. Says Rav Shimon, then you're chayiv. My taima, not because it's considered that you sold it to hektish, because Karina Bey, we could call it v'goyna mi beis oish. Whereas v'sheina chayiv b'chusa pater to Karina Bey v'goyna mi beis oish. Says the Gemara, beautiful, but michdi. Let's understand this at a little bit of a deeper level. Shamina leila Rav Shimon. We know that Rav Shimon holds what? Amar shchita sheina ru'uya loishba shchita. So kachin nami shchita sheina ru'uya hi. When you shecht an animal that belonged to kachin, it's not a good shchita. So there should be no chiv at all. Answers the Gemara. Kiyos Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yechon b'sheichet timimim mi bifnim l'shem Bailim. What's coming out is, says the Gemara of Shimon, is discussing a case in which he shechted an animal which was a tamim. There was no balim, there's no mumim inside the Beis HaMikdash, and he did it for the sake of the original owners, a shtickle Robin Hood matziv. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. But if that's true, then the owner Kilu got back the Karen because the animal was shechted on his behalf. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avin, says Rav Yitzchak bar Avin, shenishvach adam. He tried. He had good intentions, and you know what happened? The blood spilled, so the carbon was never brought. Another teretz, Kiyasa Ravin Amar Rav Yechon v'sheichei tamim mifnim sheloi l'sheim bailim. And how does that work? As we turn over to Ayin Vav Amid Beis, says the Gemara of Reish Lakish. That you shechted it sheloi l'sheim bailim. Let's look at the bottom Rashi of the previous summon. I apologize. The shchita ru'i. The shchita was good. The Kaimelan calls Shman ksherin. Saying that a shechted l'shalosh was kosher. Just to remind ourselves, we learned Bakar Pesach is the exclusion to that. The Karen l'chazil bailim the Kaimelan shlo bailim the shem chayva. A third taret, says the Gemara as we move over to Ayin Vav Amid Beis. For Reish Lakish Amar b'shoichet bali mum b'chutz. The case is where you shechted an animal that has a mum, but you did it b'chutz. You did it outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Look at the top Rashi. Rashi says shchita heter b'chutz. You're allowed to shecht it outside. So says the Gemara. 1 second. Tahi ba Rav Elazar. Rav Elazar pondered Tahi from the lashon of meriach bekankan, like you smell the jug, you're trying to pull it in. He was dayik. He thought about it deeply. Tahi ba Rav Elazar. Le Rav Yochanan. According to the opinion of Rav Yochanan, we're on the second line of Ayin Vav Amid Beis. Le Rav Yochanan. Shchita materes. According to Rav Yochanan, who says the case is that it's a good shchita, according to Rav Shimon, is because you're sheichei tamimim bifnim. Ask the Gemara, so is this considered shchita materes? That you're allowed to eat the animal? Well, it's zrika materes. L'reish Lakish, and ask Rav Elazar further, according to Reish Lakish, shchita materes? V'lopedia materes. It's the redemption of the animal. So says the Gemara, you're right. And now, actually, now you're right. Ishtamid say hader Rav Shimon. Rav Elazar, you were tahi. You thought deeply, but you forgot about the din of Rav Shimon, who says, Kol oime lizraik kizarik dami, Kol oime liftais kipadoi dami, and explains the Gemara how Rav Shimon holds these two dinim. Before we see how Rav Shimon holds these two dinim, let's take a moment to look at Rashi. It shamid say Rav Elazar hadar Rav Shimon kol oimid v'chulu, kol oimid liftais. Ubali mumin, an animal the mum is kibeduyim dami hoyel v'seif lekach. Ubali mumin, says Rashi in the fourth narrow line, meikaron askinon. Di b'shekadam akdashin es muman. If you are makdashin in that state to lachazi lepidin, then you can't redeem it anymore. Mishat nishchatu. Di shamino le Rav Shimon lach shaliv the Rav Shimon shemaitza basraisa pseches temura kachim mizbeach b'chlal ha'amodav haracham nishchita. If it was a mum meikara, then it's a different din. So we conclude, says the Gemara, Kol ha'ime, din number 1 was, Kol ha'ime lizraik is kizarik dami. Where does Rav Shimon hold of this klal? That anything that is fit to be sprinkled through the zrika is considered as if it's done. Titani, we learned in the Bryce of Shimon Aimer. Yesh noiser shumetame tomas oichlin. V'yesh noiser she'ena metame tomas oichlin. Ketzad lon livnei hazrika. If it was left overnight prior to the zrika, prior to put on the mizbeach, ena metame tomas oichlin. Whereas if it was lon, if it was left overnight la'achar zrika, then metame tomas oichlin. What does it mean before the zrika? Kodim shenira lizrika. Before it was fit, it was rali for the zrika. Lachar zrika as well means while lachar shenira lizrika. Says the Gemara further, kodim shenira lizrika lan maihi. What does it mean that it was left overnight before it was fit for the zrika? It means before it was fit for the zrika, meaning there wasn't a moment during the day that the zrika could have been done. Why? The shchita samel l'shkias achama. It was shechted right before sunset. And that is when ve'ina mitame tumas eichlin. It's not going to have any tuma because you didn't do anything wrong, and it was a lawn in such a scenario. It was left overnight. Lach shenira zrikas lawn. What is that? Avishos b'yom the mizrike. You had time. Then mitame tumas eichlin. So says the Gemara from all this. What do we see? Alma. The fact that there was a moment of time that this carbon could have been zyriked, could have been sprinkled by day, and you did it. Then when it's lawn is mitame Thomas Oichlin. What was the second dinner we conclude? Teaches Rav Shimon, and the shoes we should stop over here is if you peek at Ein Zayin Amud Aleph, you'll see it's one of the shortest amudim, perhaps not the shortest amud, Ein Zayin Amud Aleph. In Baba Kama, one line over here. So pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmaya.